we're going to go ahead and get started as people continue to kind of funnel into Zoom. But welcome everyone to the E1 Tech Talk. Thanks for joining us and spending some time with us this afternoon. This Tech Talk is brought to you by the Entrepreneurs First, or E1 partnership. So for those of you not familiar with E1, this is a collaboration of 15 regional partners in Southeast Minnesota coming together to bring programming and support to regional tech entrepreneurs and really help bring to enhance regional connectivity and assets for tech entrepreneurs based here in Southeast Minnesota. So my name's Amanda Leitner. I'm the Director of Communications at Collider, which is one of these E1 partners. We are located in Rochester, Minnesota. We're a nonprofit that supports Rochester entrepreneurs through space, education, storytelling, and events. And my colleague Jamie is running the tech behind the scenes there. So we're both here with you today. So please remember, during this session, everyone has the opportunity to ask your questions. We want to make sure that this conversation is geared to what you're looking for. As soon as we get started, or whenever you would like, please enter your questions in the Q&A tab. Make sure it's the Q&A and not the chat. I'm not sure if you can all see the chat or not, but make sure you're placing your questions in the Q&A. And please feel free to do this whenever you have a question, and I'll monitor those and make sure they're getting answered throughout the conversation today. So you can all open that up now and get started asking your questions. So I also wanted to take a few moments to let you know about our E1 resources for those of you who aren't as familiar. If you're a tech entrepreneur or starting a tech venture, I really encourage you to check out the E1 Entrepreneurs First website. It's under the Red Wing Ignite main web page, so you can check it out there. And E1 also has a Facebook page, its own page. If you search for E1 Entrepreneurs First Southeast MN, you can find it there as well to keep up with all of the programming going on through E1 as well as the E1 partners. And the really cool thing, if there is a cool thing about having to do everything virtual, is that you can connect in with all these different events from your home. So definitely increasing connectivity during these times. So in addition to these monthly tech talks, E1 also has weekly office hours and will be hosting a expo at some point to better connect and serve entrepreneurs within Southeast Minnesota. So be sure to follow them, follow E1 on Facebook, on the website to learn more about these events and programming. And this E1 partnership is made possible from a grant from Launch Minnesota, which is a statewide initiative to support the growth of tech entrepreneurs. So again, thank you so much for being here today. It's my pleasure to be the host and moderator here today. And we're joined by David Russick as our guest of honor here today. So I'll take a few moments to tell you a little bit about David. And again, please start putting your questions in the Q&A and we'll get started. So David Russick, he's an established entrepreneur and angel investor. He's co-founder, managing director, and board member of Gopher Angels, which is an investment organization dedicating to supporting entrepreneurship and early stage businesses in the state of Minnesota and throughout the Midwest. He was also a founder and CEO of Tubbs Inc., which is a family-owned waste and recycling business operating in the Twin Cities, Denver, and Cleveland. He's also the co-founder of Bagster LLC, which is a nationwide waste services company, and served as president and board member prior to Bagster's acquisition by a Fortune 500 company. In addition, David serves on the board of advisors for Dakota Venture Group, which is a student-managed angel fund. He's also an advisor and co-teaches the Atland Fund, which is a student-managed early-stage fund within the Carlson School of Management at the University of Minnesota. He recently has been named the Director of Strategy at Mighty Spark Food, and is the Director of Business Development for Rover Robotics. Both of these startups are based in Minnesota. And he's been featured in numerous publications such as Star Tribune, Twin Cities Business, the Minneapolis-St. Paul Business Journal, as well as many others. And he's a graduate of the University of South Dakota, earned a Master of International Management degree from the Thunderbird School of Global Management at Oxford University. So thanks so much for being with us here today, David, and sharing your journey. I think you're muted there, David. There we go.
Sorry.
There we go.
Let me start all over again. Thank you for inviting me to speak. I think it's great to see the kind of support throughout Minnesota that founders and entrepreneurs are getting from organizations like yours and your partners. So I think it's tremendous.
So I think to get started, the best way to kind of understand your journey is to learn more about how you got interested and started with entrepreneurship. So where did kind of this bug start for you that led to your beginnings on this entrepreneurial journey?
You know, it's funny, it's really early. In my neighborhood, I used to put on little carnivals amongst the neighborhood kids, did not make friends with the parents because they would all come to my house and to the yard, and we had all sorts of skits and things set up in which they have to give, you know, share quarters and all that. So it started pretty young, and where that comes from, I'm not 100% sure. But I do have a family background where early pioneers around the 1880s, 1890s, moving into Sioux Falls, South Dakota, and setting up sort of a general store, which then morphed in later decades into a department store. So there could be a little bit of influence watching family run their own businesses.
So then you kind of made this transition from entrepreneurship into investment. So what sparked that initial interest to turn from entrepreneur to investing into entrepreneurs? And how did you make that transition from running businesses to then investing in them?
Well, I think that, you know, with the founders on the call here, I'm sure they're realizing how much focus it takes to run your business. So while we were doing, and I say we, I worked with my wife, Sarah, while we were doing Tubbs and Bagster over the years, we were so focused on that we were completely unaware of what was going on around us as far as the investor world. With Tubbs, we grew organically. With Bagster, we did bring in investors. But again, we had our blinders on as far as the rest of the community. So how did we get started and why? Two things. With both Tubbs and Bagster, the community, particularly in Minnesota, was very helpful with our growth over the years and providing assistance with nothing expected in return. Everything from an attorney helping us out through problems occasionally to we were able to arrange financing, brand new company through a vendor of equipment in Minneapolis who went to bat for us to get financing from the manufacturer. And so we saw this as paying it forward after our exit from Bagster. So there was some of that. Now, the more self-interested side was we're also looking for means to deploy the money we earned from our Bagster exit, but also looking for new ideas to where we could maybe invest in and then join a management team to help them scale their business, much like we did with our two companies.
So I'm guessing a lot of people on the call today are interested in Go for Angels and kind of your journey with that. So to kind of start that bit of the conversation, can you talk a little bit about what Go for Angels is and how Go for Angels originally got started?
Yeah, it was kind of interesting in the sense that we sort of fumbled our way into it, frankly. We had no intention of starting an angel network. But, so what we did initially, after catching our breath after our exit with Bagster, we worked really hard, but it was a lot of fun. About 6 months after that, we decided to maybe look at angel investing on our own. The problem with that is we didn't have deal flow. The amount of money that we were going to invest wouldn't really propel a company very far. And then we also realized we did not have the skill set to adequately vet these companies and wanted to get beyond investing in heart and gut, which was sort of angel investing at one time. Just coincidentally, at that time, when we were coming to this realization, I got an email from Thunderbird where you mentioned I went to graduate school for international management. And they were just starting an angel network and looking for people to participate. But this was in Arizona. So for about 1.5 to 2 years, my wife and I traveled to Arizona to participate in the Thunderbird Angel Network. We really liked it. We liked the collaboration with other angel investors, pooling your money into an investment, collaborating outside of the angel group with other angel groups, which later on for Gopher Angels proved to be very important for us. But we keep flying back to Minneapolis after these nice events in Arizona, but there was nothing like this network of angels in Minnesota. So I think the entrepreneurial itch sort of motivated us to go ahead and start our own angel network in Minnesota. But we had that little bit of experience in Arizona with the Thunderbird Angel Network, but we had no connections in the community on that side. Yeah, we ran our own business, but again, as I mentioned, we sort of had our blinders on and really didn't have good connection in the community to reach other angel investors or get the support we needed to start this. So we spent about 6 months reaching out to community leaders and investors. An attorney, Joy Lindsay, I don't know if you're familiar with her, but she's with StarTech, had been an angel investor back to 1998, I think is when she started. And then a handful of others, including John Stavik, who runs the Gary S. Holmes entrepreneurship program at the Carlson School. So we put together a board of advisors to help us get this thing started and kicked off. So in March of 2012, after 6 months of research, how do we do this? How do we put together a program? We kicked it off again in March of 2012. We have 4 investors in the room, Sarah and me, and that was our first meeting. So that's how we started. And where we are today, we have 80 investors in the group today. We've invested $16 million in almost 60 companies, primarily in Minnesota, but we do invest throughout the Midwest.
So venture capital is extremely entrepreneurial as well, it sounds like.
Yeah, it was really surprisingly and unintentionally, it was like starting a new business, which we didn't anticipate. So it took a lot more time and effort than we thought.
So we have a question in the Q&A for you. Could you talk about Gopher Angel's interest in startups in the food and agricultural space? So where does that stand in your investment portfolio and interests?
Yeah, relatively new. I would say in the last 2 years, we've been getting into food and ag tech, and we have invested. And there was an effort on our part to recruit accredited investors from the food and ag industry, Cargill, General Mills, for example. So we were able to get some executives from those companies to join. And as a result of that, we upped our investment in food and ag. But I also want to be honest with you. It's on the lower end of our dollar amounts invested, somewhere between maybe 80 to, I think the maximum when we've invested in food or ag type companies has been maybe $150,000. So it's on the lower end of what we invest. And that's just the way it is right now with Gopher Angels. I hope that changes.
So when you're looking at these potential companies to invest in, what are some very positive signs in the company? What do you look for in a company that you choose to invest in, and what stage in their business cycle are you looking to invest in?
Yeah, first I want to lay the groundwork for that. It goes by industry. So not all industries are treated equally. So for example, in the medical device or healthcare related industry, we do not expect them to have any revenue. What we look at, for example, is how long of a runway do they have for FDA. We've pretty much, not across the board, but pretty much have invested, and I would say 40% of what we do is in healthcare related businesses. And most of these have been non-invasive for the most part, so a relatively short FDA path, relatively short. For example, as early investors, and I'll continue on the healthcare side for a little bit, as early investors, we take the biggest risk. And if there's going to be a 10, 12-year FDA path and they're going to need $250 million to bring to market a brand new heart, that's not for us. So I just want to explain that. But on the other hand, if it's non-invasive or mildly invasive with a short FDA path or a clear path to acquisition, that's of interest. So that's healthcare. On the tech side, what we look for, B2B is our most favored, but we also do B2C. But we do look for, on the B2B side, at a minimum, testing with potential customers. Ideally, they're paying for it, but not necessarily. So a beta test is what I'm referring to. So you have this with customers who are testing out your concept, your minimum viable product, and as investors, then we can go talk to them to see how viable this is on a growth trajectory. So that's the tech side. It can be pre-revenue. We prefer revenue, but we understand if there's a beta test, then that helps with the pre-revenue side of it before we get involved in investing. Now, on the food and egg side, which is about 20% of what we invest in, 15 to 20%, we do like to see revenue. We like to see product on the shelves, or at least on e-commerce revenue is also a substitute for being on the shelves. We like to determine shelf velocity, and we like to know that there's a proof of concept. So that's on the food and ag side. I hope that explains there. We have some other areas where we've done some CPG, we've done a little bit of clean tech, but the major components of what we invest in, primarily because of where we're located in Minnesota, is healthcare related, medical device or healthcare IT, tech related, food and ag.
We have another question for you in the chat here. Can you talk about sectors or geographies where you're not seeing as many opportunities as you'd like or would expect to see?
Yeah, geography-wise, we've been very active. Our first bias is Minnesota-based companies, and I'm not talking just Twin Cities. I think we see a lot of stuff coming out of the Twin Cities, primarily because of the population base. You're going to see more, but we have been investing in companies throughout Minnesota. So that's number one. Number two, secondly, what we'll look at is Midwest. I hope I'm answering the question here, but the Midwest, and when I say Midwest, it's the broader Midwest. And we have partnerships with other angel groups and micro VCs from Ohio to Denver, from Oklahoma on up the Great Plains to Minnesota and our neighboring states. So we co-invest with these companies. If they, on the Midwest side, if they have a company they've invested in and they need to fill the round, then they will bring that to us, and without obligation, we will take a look at that to see if it's of interest to our group. That also holds true vice versa. We have had and have taken companies from that we've invested in Minnesota, taken those on a road trip around, not literally a road trip, but a virtual road trip, and shared these deals with our Midwest regional angel partners and micro VCs, and have had them invest in some of our companies. Sector-wise, we're happy with our deal flow. happy what we're seeing originating out of Minnesota. Would like to see more from Greater Minnesota, but we see some really good deals coming out of Greater Minnesota as well.
Maybe a follow-up question for you. How have you seen the landscape and investment opportunities change with COVID, and how are you thinking about at Go for Angels, what that might look like for the next 6 months or so? And I know it's incredibly hard to predict, but how is your organization thinking about this, and what are you seeing changing in the environment?
I think a good point. I can't see the future. I think there's a lot of uncertainty out there for everybody. But I think when March of this year, I think where everybody was in shock as to what was going on. That also happened with our investors, some of them more than others. So we saw a little bit of a tightening of the money. We frankly haven't recruited the number of investors we normally would recruit in a given year to join Go for Angels. I think our investors are becoming a little bit more, what would you say, conservative in their investments. On the other side, I'm seeing the entrepreneurs who are coming with deals to us becoming a lot more aggressive on their deal terms, meaning making it a lot more attractive to the investors.
We have another question here for you. Can you give your take on newer funding mechanisms like WeFunder that take money from non-accredited investors? Do you see this as the future of investment, or a future for investment, or is it something that you think needs to be further scrutinized?
Yeah, strictly my opinion. You get 10 guys in the room, you're going to get 10 people with different opinions. I think it has its place, but if you're a company that's looking to scale, and that's not everybody, but if you're looking to scale, I don't think you want to have non-accredited investors on your cap table. There are ways to protect yourself as a company, but the whole reason they passed these regulations originally is they just didn't want grandma taking all of her income and investing in X company, which then all got lost. So the assumption is an accredited investor has enough income and knowledge to be able to lose that money. So you leave yourself somewhat open for liability if non-accredited investors are involved. That's a concern. But the other thing is, if you're looking at successive rounds of funding, you want as clean a cap table as possible. And I believe in crowdfunding investing, I think the max you can do, I believe, is $10,000. And if that's the case, you're going to need a lot of $10,000, and that's the max. A lot of $10,000 on your cap table to get anything worthwhile for you to move forward. So that's a company that's looking to scale. On the other hand, if you're looking at a lifestyle company, meaning you're not looking to exit, you're not concerned about scaling, you may be more local, for example. I think this holds a lot more potential for that kind of financing, so it does have a place.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting point. Like you said, those lifestyle businesses, the corner stores that people can see and walk past every day, feels really enticing, to invest in. They can be cash flow positive. Obviously a lot sooner than like a medical device or something like that. So it's kind of two different beasts there.
Exactly.
All right. So please continue to put your questions in the Q&A. But I wanted to ask you, we always talk about angel investors, VC firms doing diligence on the startups. But when the entrepreneur is looking for investment, what diligence should they do on potential investors?
Yeah, that's important because we've had that experience. I think that I've heard horror stories about partnering up with bad actors in the investing world. So you better be careful. I say that because you want a good partner and you're in bed with these people. So I think that you should be doing as much diligence as they do on you, you should be doing on them. Who have they worked with before? Who have they funded before? And find out who they are and talk to those founders. You can Google to see what certain firms or angel groups have invested in, and talk to those. Not always the ones that ended up, being successful, but maybe the ones that did not, and find out a little bit more about who it is you're going to be accepting money. Really difficult when someone sort of waving a $500,000 check in front of you. But I think you can end up in tears if you don't get the right partner as an investor. What do you look for an investor? You want them to bring something to the table, ideally, besides just money. Early stage companies, seed stage companies are going to need a lot of help. Domain expertise, whether that's industry domain or domain expertise in the form of finance or marketing, whatever it is. I think you want someone, an investor or an investor group, at least early on, that can help grow your company, who you can go to, call them at 7 o'clock at night and say, look, I was confronted with this problem. What do you think is a good way to manage this? That's the ideal investor partner that you could find.
And I think along those lines, kind of as an angel investor, what kind of relationship do you like to have with entrepreneurs? Is it hands-on? Does it depend on the company? My understanding was kind of angel level was a little bit more hands-on, and venture might not be, but that you're probably going to tell me it depends on the situation and the person, but I'd be interested to have your take on that and what your typical interaction looks for a startup that you've invested in.
Yeah, we've had a really good active group within Go for Angels out of our 80 members. You're right, it depends on the company. Some companies don't want that kind of help or assistance. But I would say a good number of the companies, we've invested in almost 60, and a good number of those companies have actually asked certain members because of their career background, what they can bring to the table, like I just described. They have actually asked our members to become involved, advisory board, a former board member, observer on the board, actually becoming part of the management team, or just an advisor, informal advisor, for example. We have a good number of our investors who take an active role. We're not intrusive though. If it's not asked for or welcome, we're not knocking on your door of the founder on a constant basis to see what's going on. We don't do that. So I think as far as the VC, because you asked about VCs, I think most VCs, not micro VCs, but most VCs are financial types that live by the spreadsheet, and they're not operators. And you have to remember that, because they're strictly and they have to. They're responsible to their LPs, people that have given them their money to invest, to be successful with those investments. And their main concern is to satisfy the LPs, and less concern about the company they invested in, essentially. They want that company to be successful. What I'm getting at is they're not operators, they're spreadsheet readers, and you're going to get a different kind of attitude from them than you would, say, with an angel investor.
So you're looking at two really different kinds of investment, it sounds like.
Absolutely.
A question here for you. Do you have any resources you would recommend as for first-time founders that they could use, such as books, podcasts, etc., that could help educate them about raising capital?
Yeah. God damn it, I'm going to forget the name. Oh, does that have to be beeped out that I just swore? Sorry about that. Now I'm trying to think. Actually, I use it as well. Brad Feld, that's where I was going. Brad Feld out of Colorado has published a couple of really good books on financing and finding funds to start your business. The terminologies that investors use, attorneys use when they're building that term sheet are really well defined and easy to understand. It's almost become a Bible for me too, as I go back and look at it occasionally. So I would recommend that one for sure. Guy Kawasaki is another author out there that talks about founders and building, for example, your investor slides and how best to do that, and some other tips. Those are two that I can think of offhand that your viewers might be interested in.
I know we have the Venture Deals book from Brad Feld, and we've done his occasionally once a year or so they put out like a class. It's like a couple weeks, so we've done that. One thing he says, and I'm interested to hear your opinion, he said never ask him for a referral as a venture capitalist. How do you feel about that? If you don't want to invest in someone, should they ask you for a referral? Or how do you kind of handle that if a company's not a good fit? What does that interaction look like?
I see what he's talking about. I wouldn't, it depends. I wouldn't and don't refer companies to other angel groups who are still in the same stage we are when it comes to investing. I will refer, if they're not ready for us because of the stage the company's in, I will refer them to other resources and that may be interested. Say, for example, a $50,000 to $100,000 seed stage is a good example. The state of Minnesota had a program there that they were funding early stage or seed stage companies with somewhere between 50 and 75,000, I believe. And that was a really attractive program. So to answer your question, we would refer that, but I'm reluctant to and people don't want our referrals if we haven't already invested ourselves.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. You don't want to refer someone on that you didn't. See, there's another question for you here. You mentioned the desire to invest in Greater Minnesota. How are you reaching out to Greater Minnesota to perhaps source deal flow? So what's your interaction look like with Greater Minnesota and the companies housed there?
Yeah, good question. I spent a lot of time driving around Minnesota early on to a lot of cities, and I have been part of the Southern Minnesota Initiative Foundation advisory board for investing. So that was one thing. So I got to see what was coming out of Southeast Minnesota. We have partnered with the Southeast Minnesota Fund out of Rochester. For example, we share deals. They're on our what we call our GUST site, where we get all of our deal flow, and so they get to see all of that coming in. We have as a member Great North Labs, which is based in St. Cloud and is heavily focused on Greater Minnesota for deal flow. So, and then doing talks like this. I've been down in Austin, participated, it's been a couple of years, but participated in a small group chat about similar to what we're talking about today. So we try and have the doors open. We're active with the Minnesota Cup is another one where companies throughout Minnesota are participating. So we're active there as well.
So we have another question for you here in the chat. Starting any business is not easy or always smooth. Do you have an example of a business you could talk about that you invested in which ran into challenges or had issues and you were able to assist them to get them through it to find success?
Well, I can give you one we invested in that failed. So it's a different point of view. We invested in this company, went through a really deep diligence process, and what ended up failing was the CEO and the CTO could not get along, and the CTO left. And then the company floundered from there. So that's one case. I think one of the companies we were able to help, I can share the name, I think it'd be all right, Omnia Fishing, based in Minneapolis here. And one of the things we tried to do to help fill their round is to go shop it around, because they needed the money to help shop it around the Midwest, like I mentioned earlier. So we got them into the Midwest Regional Angel Conference to pitch there. And then we did that for a couple of other companies over the last couple of years. Within Go for Angels, we've had, I mentioned some Cargill execs. One of them happened to be, had a career on the pork side. And one of the companies we invested in happened to be based in Iowa and had a technology focused on reducing piglet death. Pigs would roll over on their piglets and they would suffocate and die. So this company had a means of preventing that. And then our member, who was part of their advisory board, helped them be introduced to people in the industry. I think those are a couple of examples.
So maybe a follow-up question to that, and maybe this is too general, but what are some ways you've seen companies fail? What are some common things that they do at the seed stage? It sounds like maybe team is one thing, and making sure team is strong, but what are some common mistakes that you see that lead startups to fail at seed stage?
Yeah, and that's really a good question. I mean, there's so many areas that you can fail, but I think one of the ones I've been seeing lately with companies that I've been consulting with, and that's watching the bottom line. You have to make money, and you need to plan to make money. You may be losing money there initially, but you have to have a plan to get cash flow positive, if not at least break even, because you can't keep that up forever. And if you're losing money and you're not planning that out properly, you'll end up failing, because you can't keep losing money forever. And people will not invest in your business if it looks like you're not going to be able to turn that around. Or at least if you're not making money, you better be able to show that even though you're not making money, it will still lead to an exit. In some industries that can happen, like the medical device. You're going to be losing money. There's going to be no revenue. You've got to go down this path of research and development and clinical testing, and you won't be making money. But that's understood. But I think I gave an example of food and ag. At some point, you need to be able to show that you can be break-even positive or positive cash flow. And I think also on the tech side, you need to be able to show at some point you're going to be able to turn that around and make money at it. So I think that's a big one.
Well, we have another question here for you in the chat. Can you speak a little bit about the $15,000 to $75,000 range angel funding organizations in Minnesota? I believe that's the question.
15 to 75?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really a tough one, and this is where there's a hole in the whole funding process. We're generally above that. I think the lowest we would get might be 85,000, but that's not intentional. We're trying to, because it's a network, we need our individual investors to come in on a deal, and we're generally on average between 300,000 to 400,000, although we've had 5 or 6 deals above $1 million. No, you've got a real challenge here. That's usually a friends and family type of source for that kind of funding. Or what I did with my businesses, at least the first one, I knew I was going to need cash, and I squirreled that money away, knowing that this is what I was going to have to spend to get started. So I had enough vision to be able to know that I will have to save to be able to fund my own businesses initially. And then again, there's friends and family. The state of Minnesota does have some programs. I'm not sure where they are. They may be fully tapped out at this point, but I would check DEED for the state of Minnesota to see what they have going. Jeff Nelson is a really good contact at DEED for this, so I would talk to him to see what's current.
Another question here for you. What's your success rate, or what's the success rate of the businesses that you invest in?
Yeah, I don't think a lot of entrepreneurs and founders understand this, and it was a bit of a shock for me as we got into the investing world. First of all the companies that have applied, we invest, and this is typical, it's not just Gopher Angels, somewhere you max at about 2%. So 2% of the companies that have applied, maybe 4,000 companies or whatever it is right now for us, we've invested in 1.5 to 2% of those. Okay. Now on the failure side, the understanding, the conventional wisdom in angel investing, and I'll give you just an example that I've used, and it can be slightly different, but as an example, you invest in 15 deals, you can anticipate 5 to 10 of those are going to fail. On the remainder, you're going to have 5 or so that'll break even. So at least you get your money back. Then you're going to have a couple out of that 15 that might be a 2x return. So I invested 50,000, I get 100,000 out of it. And then 1 or 2 of those would be a home run, which makes up for the entire loss of the other, 10 that you lost out, or that were break even, or you only got maybe a 2x return. So there'd be a 10 to 30x return. 30 would be tremendous. We don't see that very often, at least not in this area. But a 10x return helps make up the losses you experienced for the other 10 that failed. So that's general conventional wisdom on an angel investing. It's a high risk asset class.
So I had a question for you about kind of some of these student angel funds that you're involved with, the Dakota Venture Group and Atlant Fund. So are they looking to typically invest in student businesses? And do you see, like, when they're looking at potential investments as students or as younger individuals, do you see that differing than kind of how Gopher Angels is looking at potential investments? So is the strategy similar, or is it different?
Yeah, and they're operating funds, so they have their own investment thesis. Number one, they're not investing in student startups unless they really look good. But for in general, no, they're not. They're just as picky because they have LPs that they have to satisfy that they're making good investments, and they're looking for a good return for their LPs, meaning the people that invested in their fund, and the students manage that money. And in both cases, I have a really high regard for these students and how well they do their diligence, because I'm a little closer to Atlant because of they participate with Gopher Angels. We're sort of strategic partners. They have a very thorough, and they have had a number of great successes, or at least companies that look like they're going to be doing very, very well. And they also have access to things at the university that Gopher Angels doesn't have, online access to things that we don't have because we can't afford it. But to answer your question, I think that they have their investment thesis, at least Atlant, is more focused on companies that meet their generation's needs. So and we sort of rely and collaborate with them when they see something that sort of strikes a chord with their generation, their age group, which the general age of Gopher Angel member is probably somewhere between 30 and on up. So these guys are in their 20s. We have a hard time relating to some of the deals that they're looking at because we're not part of that demographic. And so they share those deals with us. And if they can come in and say that this looks really good, we rely on that and we'll co-invest with them. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, absolutely. That was kind of what I was interested in. If they are more likely to kind of look at solutions geared towards their age group or kind of have more interest in that. So yeah, I think that's very interesting. We talked about, you know, entrepreneurs, what diligence they should do on potential investors. But in the community here, or in general, what are some strategies that entrepreneurs can use to connect with potential angel investors within their networks? I feel like, you know, besides Go for Angels, sometimes people don't know that angel investors are a little harder to find. So how should people find angel investors, and when should they start to connect with them?
Yeah, you want to start early. You don't want to wait until you need the money. You can anticipate it's going to take, once you start the investment, you know, looking for investors, you need to plan on 6+ months of being able to fill around. You might be lucky and find somebody quicker than that, but I think for planning purposes, you should figure at least 6 months. And you're going to have thick skin because you're going to be talking to a lot of different investors who are going to pass. One's going to say that you're too early. One's going to say you're too far along. I mean, it's just like, and I have a lot of empathy here because I was there myself with my own businesses. So you're going to hear a lot of feedback, but the thing is, take that input that you get from these investors, whether they pass or not, take that as a learning lesson, and maybe tweak your investor pitch a little bit. But how do you connect with these investors? The beauty of a thing like Go for Angels or some of these micro funds, but Go for Angels is we have 80 investors as part of our organization. So you can go to a group like Go for Angels or the Southeast Fund and be able to tap into the greater amount of money for less effort. But there are a lot of angel investors out there that do not want to belong to a group and don't join funds. And how do you meet them? The idea here then is to be actively involved in your community as early as possible. Things like we're doing today, but also meetups, which is a little more difficult with COVID and all that. But I recommend getting involved in these community functions, events, where some investors will be participating, but not only investors, you'll talk to other founders who may know investors who would be better suited for what you're doing than what they were doing when maybe that investor passed. So you need to be involved is the best thing to do. Don't sit at home. I think getting another resource are accelerators. And we have a number of really strong accelerators in Minnesota. There's Generator. I know the one's primarily based in the Twin Cities, but there's Generator. There's Techstars. There's one for impact investing here in town. The point is what they do is you become part of the accelerator. Once you go through their programming, they will take you on a road show and introduce you to their Rolodex, if anybody uses Rolodex anymore, but their Rolodex of investors. So that's another means of getting out there and finding investors.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. I think a lot of us listening on this call, one of the most frequent things we hear is someone coming to us saying, how do I connect with this specific person? And they're, you know, in this $75,000 to $150,000 range needing that, and they need it now. And it's like, well, that's a tough situation to be in for the entrepreneur. So we have time for one final question here, and I'll ask you one to kind of wrap up here, but what is kind of your outlook on the high growth startup future of Minnesota and the current state of investment in Minnesota? Where do you think we are now and where are we going?
Yeah, even with the uncertainty with COVID and all that, I think this is the best I've ever seen. People are raising funds. Money is becoming more available. You still need to be investable. One of the things I wanted to get across to your those attending this is you got to remember that investors are not investing because of philanthropy. They're not looking to give their money away. They're looking to get their money invested and get that return on investment back. The sooner they get that back and the more of it they get back, the more they can reinvest in other founders. So this is not philanthropy. Don't go expect someone to give you a handout because you're a founder of a company and they need to feel, some sympathy for you. That ain't going to happen. This is a hard-nosed decision on the investor's part. But to answer your question future-wise, things are looking really good. Matchstick recently, I think they just finished $30 million round or fund that you just finished. We're aware then Bread and Butter, I think you have Brett Bohl on this program. They're raising. You have a new fund that I can't divulge this yet, but is going to be trying to fill that $15,000 to $75,000 space in pre-seed money. So that's on the way. Maybe in the next 6 months, that'll be around. I think the state of Minnesota is becoming more actively involved in trying to help in different ways with funding. So no, these are good times, even given the uncertainty of the economy right now. It's great. And I think the support for entrepreneurs like programs like this are tremendous, which was not occurring maybe 7 years ago was when we started Go for Angels.
I think with that, we'll wrap up for today. So thank you so much, David, for being with us today, spending your time connecting with the tech entrepreneurial landscape here in Southeast Minnesota. So thank you so much for doing this today.
Oh, it's a lot of fun, and I have to wish all these founders good luck. I know it's a lot of hard work. Again, I've been there, but it can be so gratifying when you have a successful company. So stick with it, and good luck.
Thank you. Yeah, so everyone joining us today, thanks for listening in. Again, check out the E1 website, and on Facebook you can find the Facebook page through E1 Entrepreneurs First Southeast MN. If you search for that in Facebook, you can connect in, find all the events, find out when the next E1 Tech Talk will be, and we'll see you next month.